Oh, I see you're also wandering through Ulfenkarn. Well, in that case, greetings ladies and laddies, and welcome back to the realms of this cursed city. In this video we are going to take care of the 6 mysterious objects of the game. These inanimate tokens come in 3 different kinds. Tombstones, very similar to the ones on the zombies' backs, stone pillars with a sinister raven on top, and 2 gallows, still displaying their already rotten away victims. Hence there are always 2 of one kind. I will show 2 different ways to paint each of the variants, so you can cherry pick whatever you like best for your own models at home. Which is also why this video might take a little longer than usual. So, without wasting any more of our precious time that could be better spent painting, let's get going! Before we lay our focus on the individual models, let me just quickly show you what base colors I will use. For the first tombstone, we will apply a dark grey base coat, going for the look of classic stone. For the other one, I took some inspiration from the work of GW's heavy metal team, and mixed a few drops of red and brown paint together, painting the second tombstone like it was carved from red granite. As we leave these 2 to dry, we can move on with the stone pillars. I painted one of them in a quite dark beige paint, as I wanted it to resemble sandstone in the end. The second one got painted in a similar fashion as the first tombstone, but this time I chose a grey tone with a slight tint of blue in it. When it comes to wood, the variation one can do is usually quite limited, so I gave the first one a very saturated brown base coat and painted the second one in a dark brown with lots of grey in it. Here's a quick overview of the objects so far. Alright! Moving on with the tombstones, I took the very rich brown again and painted the wooden stump next to them. In hindsight, this was not that bright of an idea, as the later dry brushing of the tombstones will most likely also touch the wood, which might not necessarily be what you want. Speaking of, we'll take a slightly brighter, rosy beige and quickly give the granite tombstone its accentuation, while simultaneously also achieving a more interesting texture. When I picked the light grey for the stone tombstone's accentuation, I apparently had some of the previous colors still on my brush. I thought about restarting with a fresh base coat, but then just rolled with it.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
In fact, I liked the outcome quite a bit, so I went back to the granite tombstone again to give it some grey highlights in return. Next, we want to take care of the flowers. I painted one bouquet in a dark purple and the other one like classic roses, but you can of course choose whatever you like best. Now we turn our attention to the other extras, painting the bells with a true metallic brass paint and the candles with a bright white. The last details left on the tombstones are the small leaves and blades of grass, for which I chose a desaturated olive green as to not make them look too healthy. Nice! The tombstones are basically done, so we can move on to the stone pillars. Just as with the tombstones, we start off by giving them some dry brushed accents and texture. For the blue tinted stone pillar, I picked a slightly paler grey with a little more blue in it, and for the sandstone pillar, we just take a brighter beige than for the base. After that, we take an accordingly even brighter color, but this time only dry brush it on the upper half of the pillar, as a means to draw the attention of the eye more towards the bird on top. As we leave the pillar itself for now, we can take care of the flourishing flora, painting the grass in the same color as on the tombstones from earlier, and the roots in a desaturated brown color. Now, I am no ornithologist, but the bird on top of the pillar is quite surely a raccoon, which is why I didn't get too fancy and quickly gave it a dark grey base coat. For the feet I used a rosy skin color, and for the key in its beak, I think we should go for something really eye-catching, therefore painting it in a bright, true metallic gold. I don't know much about the rules yet, but I imagine that it might hold a specific purpose for the players. Okay, now for the last 2 objects left. We start by quickly giving the wooden gallows some highlights and texture, just like we did with the other objects. For the skeletons, I actually picked some slightly different beiges, to kind of implicate different stages of decay and age. I would recommend to dry brush the ribcage but layer the other parts. I personally prefer skeletons to be painted beige, but if you like them grey or white, you can absolutely go for that, as the steps themselves don't change. While we're at it, we make a little detour and quickly base the paper scrolls nail to the gallows. After the base coat, we pick slightly brighter colors for the first highlights and quickly dry brush them all over the model. Be very gentle when you dry brush the outstretched arms, as they are quite fragile and could easily break. Also be careful as to not accidentally hit the wooden gallows. After the first highlight, we apply a lighter second highlight. The darker skeleton just got dry brushed in a very bright beige, but for the paler skeleton I actually used a light grey. This time we only catch the most raised areas, like their knees, their collarbones, and the top of the one skeleton's head, as those are the most illuminated spots. Now for the extras. For the gallows knot I picked a very rich, almost yellow paint, and the sack that's put on the one skeleton's head gets painted in a very rich, saturated brown. Alright! Just like last time, we take care of the bases now. First off, we lay a foundation using a very thick paint with grains of sand mixed in, Sterlite mud from Citadel in this case. After that's fully dry, we take a slightly paler brown and dry brush it over for some more interesting texture. Then we dab a little bit of that mustard yellow we used for the ropes onto the base, and finish them off by painting our few cobblestones in a dark grey. Okay, after all those different colors and techniques, it's time for the fun, rewarding step. Load your big brushes with dark wash and then cover the models with them. I used a brown wash for the granite tombstone as well as the sandstone pillar and the hanged skeletons, as I didn't want to desaturate and darken them down too much. The only part that doesn't get a brown wash is the raven on top of the sandstone pillar. For him, as well as the objects with the grey stone look, we use a black wash. Another thing I chose to do was to lightly wash the white candles with a yellow tinted wash, but you don't have to do that. Now we just need to finish off the bases with some smooth black trims, and we are done with the speed paint. This is the result, and I really like how they turned out. Even though all of them come in pairs, we've got a nice variety going on, and every object now has its own flair and an easily distinguishable counterpart. All 6 of the mysterious objects are now fully painted to a table-ready standard, and as always I want to use the next few minutes to show you guys some more tips and tricks to even further upgrade these already lovely looking models. Okay, the first thing we want to do is to put down some more highlights. Starting with the candles on the tombstones, I use pure white for the dripping wax and a dark grey to pick out the wicks. I then took the technical paint Nihilak Oxide and partially painted the brass bell with it. I don't really know if this makes sense, but it sure does look cool. For the tombstones themselves, we take a light grey and pick out some spots on the most raised parts to give them more definition. We don't want to overdo this step, so only put a little bit of paint here and there. We do the same with the granite tombstone using a light terracotta paint. When highlighting the stone pillars, we also don't want to just trace every edge. Rather, only paint the outward facing edges and the underside of the carved in rectangles. The birds on top of the pillar are most likely part of Torgilius' menagerie, which is why we paint their eyes in a flaming red color. Moving on to the hanged skeletons, we first pick out the nails with a dark grey, as I think that any true metallic metal would be too distracting in the end. For the darker skeleton, we take the very bright beige from the last dry brush again, and pick out all of the nice details from the cast. When you come across larger bones, like the knees or other joints, just paint the most upward facing parts. The other skeleton follows the same concept, but this time I chose a light grey for the highlights. Turning our attention to the sack on his head, we first use the very rich brown from earlier to catch all of its folds. After that, we take a light pale beige and paint it in small streaks over the highlights to simulate the texture of rough cloth. Okay, now it's time for some more storytelling. We prepare the parchment by lightly dry brushing it and then highlight the edges and folds. For the writing, I wanted to again try a completely different method and use the finest marker I had available for the black lines. It worked quite well for a first try, and I even managed to paint a little skull with crossed bones on the underside of one of the parchments. The last thing I want to do here is to throw some vegetation onto the bases of the markers before calling this paint job officially done. Whew, what a ride. They may just be some small tokens, but hot damn do they have a lot going on. Every bit has its own distinctive flair and has its own uniqueness to it. Now with all the extra details, I think the objects really look nice and serve as the best example as to how much you can really get out of even the smallest of casts. If you're following me along on this series with your own models at home, you will have 18 of the 60 cursed city models finished by now. And as always, I have a guide with the exact colors that I used in this video down in the description. I really hope you had a lot of fun watching this video and maybe even recommend it to a friend who might like it too. If you have any questions, maybe a couple of suggestions, please be my guest and share your thoughts in the comment section. In the next video we will take care of the dire gargoyles and the gnawbone strays. I'm sorry that these might not be the most exciting minis to paint, but we have to get them done anyway, so we might as well do them now and save the cool characters as our reward for later. If you would like to catch their paint job, as well as the other upcoming Cursed City models, feel free to hit the subscribe button. As I am very looking forward to seeing you again in my next video. Until then, take care.